Sister, you promised to share him, but now you want the human all for yourself? Captain Elias Vren feels the uncomfortable weight of sweat beneath the collar of his reinforced tactical suit as he stands in the docking bay of the small outpost station, recounting the last coordinates known to him. Despite the swirling sense of dread inside his chest, an all-too-familiar feeling born from years of missions gone wrong, he tries to maintain a facade of calm control. His hair is cropped close to his scalp, exposing the faint widow's peak on his forehead, and a slight scar traces its path across his left cheek, the skin there slightly tight from the old injury. A light sheen of moisture catches on the edges of the plates along his shoulders, which are worn, dented, and scratched, a silent record of battles survived and comrades lost. He steps toward a large viewport overlooking the barren grey-blue expanse of moon called Kethralis, the dim glow of distant suns casting shifting shadows. The environment has always unnerved him, the planetary dust swirling in intermittent storms, the promise of hidden sinkholes and lurking predators. The automatic doors slide open behind him with a hiss that prompts him to clench his left fist out of reflex. It's a habit he's never been able to break. Whenever tension hums in his nerves, his hand curls in on itself. This time, the door's noise isn't just some maintenance bot or random crew member. It's them. He straightens, turning with a composed nod. Sarya'lyn and Nyra'vel enter, their alien elegance both captivating and jarring in this utilitarian human setting. Sarya is tall, her form sheathed in sleek black armor that seems molded to her shape, patterns swirling around the edges like molten metal waiting to cool. The subtle gleam of her skin under the station's artificial lights reveals dusky bronze tones threaded with cobalt shadows. Thick, cerulean braids spill down her back, each coil interwoven with delicate silver threads. Her large, sharply tapered ears twitch slightly at the faint hum of machinery, and her silvery piercings catch the light as if responding to her slightest movement. Next to her stands Nyra, shorter by a head, but no less striking with raven black hair that falls to her mid-back in a glossy sheet, edged in faint crimson when it hits the overhead lighting. Her skin is a pale lavender that seems to hold veins of opal beneath it, producing a lustrous effect of shifting pastel shades. While Sarya's eyes reflect layered shades of blue, ice meeting deep ocean, Nyra's gaze carries a violet-silver swirl, flickering with hidden starbursts whenever her emotions spike. A tension that Elias has grown accustomed to reading passes between the sisters. Their stance is a mirror in some ways, both proud, poised, exuding a warrior's grace. But Sarya's posture seems inherently protective, while Nyra's posture betrays a subtle challenge. The differences extend to their skill sets. Elias has watched them spar with each other in the station's training room. Sarya moves like a silent blade, close quarters, lethal in every pivot, relying on agility and quick, decisive strikes. Nyra is more cunning in range, able to handle complex weapons that demand precision. She manipulates the environment and vantage points with a strategic mind. And then there's him, human soldier trained in tactics and survival, occasionally feeling that pinch of self-doubt when faced with the extraordinary abilities of alien races. But something deeper runs between the three of them. Elias can't ignore it, though he tries to keep it locked away beneath the regrets that weigh on him. He lost his team in a disastrous mission on a remote colony world. Now he stands at the edge of forming a new bond with these two alien sisters, and it terrifies him. He wonders whether the crushing guilt of losing anyone else might destroy what's left of his spirit. "We have the last known coordinates," Elias says, speaking in a tone that's neutral out of habit. He catches Nyra's eyes flicker momentarily, brightening with a faint silver glimmer. "Our scanners picked up an anomalous power signature below the surface of Kethralis. We believe it's an energy core that could power the Allora's heart. That's the name of their battered vessel, currently limping with failing engines, in dire need of a replacement core. If we can retrieve it, We can fix our ship and get off this moon once and for all. Sarya inclines her head, her braids clinking faintly with the motion. So we descend into the labyrinth beneath the surface. Her voice, calm and controlled, carries its own music. We'll have to expect the Drevak. As if summoned by the name, an image flashes in Elias's mind. The crystalline carapaces of insect-like predators, spiked and dripping with corrosive fluids. He fought smaller versions before, barely surviving with half his squad. That memory alone coils cold inside him. He resists the urge to clench his left fist, but fails, and his knuckles tighten. The Drevak might be the least of our problems, actually, he says. Our instruments show electromagnetic surges that might fry our equipment underground. Nyra exhales in a hum, a resonant tone that Elias has learned to interpret as frustration or a flicker of anger. We'll adapt. She turns her head, braids of midnight hair sliding across her shoulder. We always do. She looks at Sarya, then at Elias. There's a flicker of challenge in her gaze. You're certain the location is correct? He nods. As certain as I can be. We'll move in a small team. Just us. Too large a group would attract unwanted attention. Sarya crosses her arms, the black metallic lines of her armor moving with the shift of her muscles. I agree, she says simply, but we need to be quick. The storms on this moon can bury an entire facility in less than a day. Nyra's hum grows quieter, her eyes drifting to her sister. Elias can almost see the swirl of conflicting emotions, the subtle jealousy, the longing for recognition. He suspects that her frustration isn't only about the mission. The undercurrent of tension in the room might stem from something they rarely articulate openly. He's become uncomfortably aware that both sisters hold him in an orbit of desire. But between them is also the tradition that ties them together. They've spoken of it in brief, sometimes heated moments. The notion that if a sister chooses a mate from outside their species, the other sister has the right to share or to object. It's an old tradition from their homeworld, archaic perhaps, but still braided into their cultural identity. Elias has never quite known how to feel about it. To be wanted by them both is as thrilling as it is unsettling. He's not sure he deserves either of them, considering the ghosts he carries. Yet in the depths of his sleepless nights, images come to him, visions of them press close, the tension between them flickering between sibling rivalry and an intensity of shared longing that includes him in ways he never expected. With a brief nod, Sarya leads the way toward the docking bay's exit, where the airlock to the surface awaits. Nyra follows, and Elias moves behind them, every sense on alert. The station's corridor is narrow, the lights flickering from power fluctuations. The sisters exchange a glance, and he feels caught between them for a moment, reminded that part of him stands in the crossfire of their familial bond and their personal ambitions. By the time they reach the exterior hatch, the wind howls just outside, sending dust swirling across the small window. Elias checks his suit's seals. The atmospheric pressure on Kethralis is precarious, and a tear could mean suffocation. Sarya taps her fingertips along her armor in a pattern that Elias has heard her do countless times. Some ancestral tune, a battle hymn from her planet's oldest records, meant to steady nerves. Nyra's breathing hums faintly, that borderline vibration in her throat that suggests she's on edge. The sliding door opens with a mechanical whine, letting in the harsh swirl of gritty wind. He steps out first, scanning the horizon. Kethralis is bathed in weak light, its sky a muddled turquoise where swirling dust clouds drift ominously. Jagged rock formations rise in clusters, their surfaces almost glossy, like hammered metal. He can see faint cracks in the ground, from which gaseous fumes sometimes escape, shimmering in the thin atmosphere. It's not a place that welcomes life. They move as a unit, carefully navigating the uneven terrain. The moorings of their outpost station are behind them, perched precariously on a plateau. Elias glances at the portable scanner strapped to his forearm. The device flickers every so often with static. He points south, indicating the route. Sarya lifts her gaze, scanning the sky. Nyra narrows her eyes, flipping the visor of her helmet down to shield her face, but a hint of the glow in her eyes remains visible. After half an hour's walk, the dust storm diminishes, revealing the entrance to a chasm in the ground. It yawns open like the maw of some ancient beast, irregular edges descending into blackness. Elias steels himself. They've read about these caverns, carved by centuries of chemical reactions within the planet's crust. The sisters exchange a glance and nod in unison. One after the other, they slip into the gloom, their boots sending faint echoes up the stone walls. Inside, the air feels cooler, tinged with a tang that reminds Elias of metal and damp earth. The corridor twists and turns, sometimes narrowing so much they have to squeeze through sideways. There are ominous scrapes along the walls, proof that something has passed here, possibly many times. The few times the corridor widens, they encounter the remains of a scouting drone, half dissolved by some corrosive substance. Sarya's voice breaks the tense silence. The Drevak must have found that drone. Keep your eyes open. She moves ahead gracefully, scanning every nook and cranny. Elias notices Nyra'vel's breathing intensify. The hush around them amplifies that slight humming resonance in her chest. The tension is real. They might be attacked at any moment. He instinctively wants to place a reassuring hand on her shoulder, but he stops himself. Boundaries feel uncertain between them. Instead, he whispers, "I've got your back." She glances over her shoulder. Her eyes catch faint silver in the darkness, a swirl of emotion flicking there. For the briefest moment, her lip twitches as though she wants to smile or speak. She does neither, simply offering a nod. They press on, following the scanner's data. It's deeper than they expected, and the passages start slanting down, guiding them into a more cavernous space. In this subterranean chamber, the environment changes. The walls appear to ripple like polished stone, reflecting shimmers from the group's helmet lights. A faint haze drifts along the air currents, tinted a dull copper hue. The ground beneath them is worn smooth in places, as though trodden by countless feet or skittering legs. The first Drevak sighting nearly rips Elias's heart from his chest. It appears from around a bend, perched on the ceiling, its crystal-like exoskeleton catching the glow of the group's lights. Its multiple eyes glimmer with an uncanny reflection, and acidic saliva drips from its pincers. In a heartbeat, it launches itself down. Elias reacts on instinct, tackling Nyra to the side, her breath leaving her in a startled hum. Sarya whips out a thin, curved blade from the harness on her thigh, and with startling speed, she leaps upward, cleaving off one of the Drevak's front limbs. The creature emits a piercing shriek, spraying corrosive fluid that hisses where it hits the ground. Elias grapples with the thrashing beast as it tries to clamp its mandibles around his arm. He grits his teeth, feeling the sizzling burn as a droplet of the creature's acid scalds a portion of his suit near his hip. While he's fighting to keep the lethal pincers at bay, Nyra scrambles to her knees, unholstering a small energy pistol. She steadies her aim and fires. A concentrated beam of power strikes the Drevak's center mass, leaving a molten-like hole in the exoskeleton. The thing collapses in a chittering spasm, then stills. The sisters exchange a quick, pointed look. Sarya flicks the blade clean with a practiced motion. Nyra's hum fades to ragged breathing. Elias winces, pressing a hand to his side to check for any sign of serious damage. It hurts, but not enough to keep him from pushing onward. He notices that Sarya's eyes flick from him to Nyra, making sure they're both intact. Nyra's gaze, meanwhile, settles on Elias's face with an intensity that seems torn between gratitude and fierce protectiveness. "Thank you," Nyra murmurs softly. Elias nods, swallowing thickly. He wonders if she's addressing him or Sarya or both. His pulse gallops, the adrenaline still coursing through him. That brief scuffle was a reminder of how quickly they could be overwhelmed here. There might be more Drevak waiting, hidden in dark corners. A corridor branches off to the left, narrower than the main path. Elias checks the scanner, but it's glitching more often than not, thanks to the electromagnetic interference. "Let's see if this is the right route," he says, gesturing for them to follow. They progress carefully, scanning the walls and ceiling. Sarya remarks that the rock composition is changing again, picking up subtle traces of metallic threading that might indicate the presence of energy sources deeper in. Nyra is the first to notice a faint throbbing hum in the air, separate from her own chest's vibrations. It resonates faintly through the ground beneath their feet, as if something large and powerful pulses deeper within. Elias's mind whirls with worry. He wonders if that pulsing might be the Queen Drevak. The reports he read spoke of a hive queen rumored to dwell beneath Kethralis, an apex predator that dwarfs the rest of her kind. He glances at Sarya'lyn and Nyra'vel. They both appear determined, yet tense, a reflection of the same anxiety in him. He tries to focus on the reasons for pushing forward, the need to find that energy core for their ship, and the question that lingers in the back of his mind. If they survive this ordeal, what then? Will he remain at arm's length, terrified of letting people in? Or will he finally give himself permission to embrace whatever new life they might forge together? They navigate an increasingly convoluted labyrinth of tunnels, a journey that stretches on for hours. Every so often, they encounter small clusters of the lesser Drevak, forced to dispatch them quickly or skirt by in narrow passages. Sarya's stealth and Nyra'vel's precise energy shots complement Elias's strategic calls, ensuring they rarely stumble into an ambush. Their synergy grows with every confrontation. Elias can feel the bond between them strengthening in the forge of peril. Yet with that closeness comes something else. Moments when the sisters exchange a brittle silence or cast longing glances that betray a rivalry they haven't yet resolved. Elias can sense it simmering beneath the surface. The mission keeps them united, but the tension of desire, jealousy, and unspoken traditions simmers. When they finally emerge into a cathedral-like cavern, they pause to take stock. The air here is surprisingly fresh, with delicate motes of reddish dust dancing in beams of faint light that seep through cracks in the ceiling. Across the vast space, dark silhouettes of rock spires rise up like pillars in a forgotten temple. Elias lifts his scanner again. It flickers, but one reading remains consistent. "Down there," he says, pointing to a slope that leads deeper into an unlit recess. The energy reading's strongest in that direction. They set up a small forward camp for a moment, just to drink some water and recalibrate the scanner. While Sarya checks the gear, Nyra moves closer to Elias. Her eyes search his, the violet silver swirling in subdued curiosity. "Your side," she murmurs. "You're in pain. Let me see." "I'm fine," he says out of reflex, but the ache in his hip from that Drevak acid burn tells a different story. The armor there has partially melted, revealing a patch of inflamed skin. Nyra doesn't wait for his permission. She carefully lifts the edge of the damaged plating and inspects the wound. Her slim fingers, tinted that ethereal lavender, hover over the burned flesh. She fishes out a small vial from her belt pouch, applying a thick salve that crackles faintly on contact. Elias sucks in a sharp breath. "That stings." "It will help keep the infection at bay," she says simply. There's a fragile kindness in her eyes, overshadowed by something more guarded. Her humming breath is quieter now, almost gentle. "Next time, I'll return the favor and shield you." He attempts a small smile. "That's supposed to be my job," he teases, but his voice wavers slightly, betraying the storm of emotions swirling inside him. Sarya approaches, noticing the gentle moment. Her face flickers with a hint of tension. She kneels down beside them, letting her fingertips trace around the edges of Elias's wound, checking the extent. She's not as gentle in her touch, but the concern is evident. "I'm sorry I wasn't quick enough," she says quietly, her braided hair shifting with the tilt of her head. "You wouldn't have been hurt if—" "It's not your fault," Elias interjects. He feels the warmth of her presence, a comfort that somehow complements Nyra'vel's. There's a palpable shift in the air, thick with unspoken feelings. He finds himself swallowing, aware of just how close they all are, crouched in this dim cavern. We're all in this together. We are, Sarya agrees, meeting his gaze. Her eyes hold a subtle swirl of deep blues, and he thinks he sees a flicker of something deeper that transcends simple camaraderie. We need you as much as you need us, Elias. Nyra's mouth presses into a thin line. She takes a moment to set the salve aside and stands. We should keep moving. I sense more Drevak in the tunnels ahead. Sarya rises as well, nodding, but her gaze lingers on Elias a second longer before she moves away to gather her equipment. He takes a breath to center himself, ignoring the flutter in his chest. The mission is priority. Everything else, feelings, hidden wants, must be locked away until they survive. They trek down the slope that leads into the deeper recess of the cavern. The air grows warmer, tinged with an earthy scent reminiscent of iron. The only illumination is from the faint seams in the rock walls, which seem to flicker with a dull, ember-like glow. It highlights the mineral veins that run beneath the surface, creating an impression that the very stone around them might be alive, pulsating with some hidden heartbeat. They navigate carefully, stepping over jagged outcrops and loose debris. Partway through one narrow corridor, they hear scuttling noises echoing off the walls. Elias motions for silence. They flatten themselves against a ledge, peering into a vast chamber where a cluster of Drevak appear to be patrolling, their bodies glinting in the ruddy light. These are smaller drones, likely gatherers or scouts. On the far side of that chamber, a structure rises from the ground, a battered column of twisted metal that might be a piece of an ancient spacecraft or some other machinery. Elias points to it, his eyes narrowing. The scanner's reading intensifies. That metal column is radiating the energy signature they've been tracking, but it's faint. It might simply be a clue leading them farther in. Sarya motions for them to split up. She'll move around the perimeter, picking off the Drevak one by one with silent kills, while Nyra covers from a vantage point with her precise energy shots. Elias will slip through the center to investigate the artifact. The plan is set in the brief exchange of glances, because by now they move with a practiced unity. In the blur of movement, Sarya engages the first Drevak. Her blade arcs downward in a lethal strike that severs a front limb. Nyra fires from a distance, her shot sizzling against carapaces, leaving molten craters. Elias dashes through the chaos, weaving between the creatures. Amid the scuttling nightmares, he reaches the twisted metal column, scanning it quickly. The device attached to his wrist struggles with the electromagnetic interference. His frustration spikes. He can't get a clear reading. There's a cluster of cables half buried in the rocky ground. Some alien script is scrawled across a metal plating. He's no linguist, but he can see some stylized design that might be a crest or emblem. The shape resembles an elongated star, wings on either side, possibly an ancient crest of a civilization that once tried to harness Kethralis' power. He hears a guttural hiss behind him and pivots just in time to see a Drevak lunging for him. With a sharp jerk, he thrusts the butt of his weapon upward, catching the creature's mandibles. It staggers, giving him time to fire a short burst of bullets into its thorax. Acid splatters, forcing him to lurch backward, but it collapses before reaching him. The tension in his left fist returns, and he forcibly flexes his fingers to steady himself. Looking around, he sees that Sarya has taken down two more, her blade flickering in the low light. Nyra dispatches another with a well-placed shot that sends shards of crystalline exoskeleton flying. Once the Drevak are neutralized, the three regroup. Elias taps on the column. It's definitely not the energy core. It might be part of something larger further down. Nyra exhales in that soft hum. "Then we continue," she says, her tone edged with frustration. "We can't leave without it." Sarya's eyes narrow. "I sense that the deeper we go, the stronger their presence will become. The hive. The Queen might be below." Elias draws in a breath, recalling the horrors of a Drevak Queen from the data he read. If that queen is indeed guarding the energy source, retrieving it will be infinitely more difficult. Still, they have no other choice. Their ship, the Allora's Heart, won't survive another leap through hyperspace without a functional core. So they forge on. The next stretch of tunnels grows tighter and more claustrophobic. The air is oppressively thick, and more of those ember-lit veins crawl across the walls, weaving themselves into swirling patterns. At times, the trio must crawl on hands and knees to get past collapsed sections. Other times, they navigate precarious ledges with a sheer drop beneath them. Each test binds them closer together. There's a moment when Nyra nearly slips off a crumbling ledge, and Elias catches her wrist. She stares at him with wide, shimmering eyes as he pulls her back to safety. He can feel her trembling, and she's not humming this time. It's a raw moment of vulnerability that passes between them like a silent confession of gratitude. Her sister sees it too. For the first time, Sarya's expression softens toward Nyra. The familial tension lingers, but a protective urge awakens in Sarya. Elias notices it, reading the dynamic in that single shared glance. He wonders if perhaps the sisters can find common ground despite the wedge of rivalry that's been pressing between them. He wants that for them. He wants it for himself, too. Finally, after what feels like hours more of navigating these perilous depths, they reach an open cavern that dwarfs anything they've seen so far. It's lit from above by a vast crack in the surface, letting in a diffuse glow of turquoise-tinged light from Kethralis' sky. The floor below is a field of rock formations shaped like stalagmites, glistening with a wet sheen. At the center stands an elevated dais of stone and metal fused together as though by intense heat. Rising from that dais is a monstrous form, the Drevak Queen. Elias's breath catches. The queen is enormous, her torso spanning what must be several meters across, her crystal exoskeleton displaying twisted prisms that refract the incoming light in a disorienting dance of color. Her eyes, multiple and layered, reflect a savage intelligence. The hiss she emits resonates through the cavern, and from the darkness at the periphery, countless Drevak drones shift and skitter in response to her summons. Beneath the queen, half buried in the dais, something hums with power. Elias's scanner nearly overloads with the reading. It's the energy core, or at least some integral piece of the technology they need. It appears to be fused to the queen's body, metal cables running into the thick plating of her thorax. She's tethered to it, or perhaps she's drawn life from it. Maybe that's why she's so large. Nyra mutters a curse under her breath. How do we separate that from her without causing a meltdown? Sarya's eyes roam the dais, analyzing potential routes for approach. We'll have to weaken her. If we kill her, the core might be damaged in the process. But if we don't kill her, she won't let us anywhere near it. Elias feels his heart hammer in his chest. Even with all their skill, going up against the queen in her lair, surrounded by drones, seems suicidal. He replays his track record of losing the people he cares about. A cold sweat breaks out on the back of his neck. We'll draw the drones away, he says, trying to keep his voice steady, or at least scatter them. If we can get some distance, we might be able to focus on the queen alone. Nyra glances at him. Let me cloak myself in the shadows behind those pillars. I'll pick off drones from a distance. Sarya can move in close. Elias, you can... Her plan is cut short by the abrupt screech of a handful of drones scuttling closer, alerted to their presence. Chaos erupts before they can finalize any strategy. Sarya lunges forward to intercept the nearest threat, cutting off the approach. Nyra turns, firing into the swarm that converges from their left flank. Elias stands his ground, trying to steady his aim, but there are too many. Acid splatters across the rocky floor as the injured Drevak shriek and thrash. The queen lets out a furious bellow, the resonance so intense it vibrates the ground beneath them. Amid the clash, Elias shouts, "We need to move back, we're too close." But the swirl of insect limbs, fracturing exoskeleton, and hissing mandibles corners them. Sarya grits her teeth, her blade slicing through tough carapace. Nyra tries to find space to shoot, but a drone leaps at her, forcing her to roll away to avoid a scything leg. Elias rams the butt of his rifle into the creature's side, knocking it off balance, and empties a burst into its thorax. In the chaos, the Queen shifts her massive body, revealing the length of the cables connecting her to that power source. The dais pulses with a mesmerizing glow, the cables tugging and twisting as if the energy is fueling the monstrous insect. Something about the Queen's movement triggers an environmental shift. Along the cavern walls, lines of shimmering liquid appear, running in meandering paths like the veins of molten ore. They cast flickers of saffron light. The floor starts trembling with low vibrations. Kethralis is unsettled by the Queen's agitation, like a planet reacting to a malignant organism in its core. Elias, pinned by a wave of drones, yells to Sarya, "Keep them off me for a second!" He shoulders his rifle and hurls a small device into the midst of the swarm. A concussive blast ripples through the chamber, scattering smaller drones and briefly dazing the Queen. A hush follows, giving them the slightest respite. Sarya seizes that moment, sprinting across the clearing with inhuman grace. She flings herself up the dais, ignoring the acid-laden spittle that rains down from the Queen's maw. Her blade carves a blazing arc, slicing through one of the large cables. The Queen screeches, thrashing in pain. Sparks erupt from the severed line, hissing energy that crackles around them. Nyra, seeing an opening, moves swiftly to Elias's side. "Go to her," she orders. "I'll handle the drones." She sets her stance, extending her weapon's power coil, a swirl of violet energy swirling around the muzzle. With deadly precision, she fires into the cluster of Drevak that are already regrouping after the blast. Elias sprints toward the dais, heart pounding. He scrambles up the jagged steps 2 at a time. Sarya is locked in a lethal dance with the Queen, slashing at the exoskeleton in a flurry of quick strikes. Each blow aimed at severing the Queen's connection to the energy lines rather than killing her outright. The Queen's massive limbs lash out, narrowly missing Sarya more than once, but the alien warrior's reflexes are honed by a lifetime of training. She darts out of range, then strikes again. Despite her skill, she's not unscathed. A vicious swipe catches her shoulder, sending her staggering sideways with a cry of pain. Elias catches her arm, steadying her. "Let me distract her. You get the rest of the cables." He meets her eyes, seeing the mixture of determination and vulnerability swirling there. Sarya nods, pressing a hand against the bleeding gash on her shoulder. "Don't get yourself killed," she growls, though it sounds more like a plea than a reprimand. Elias fires at the Queen's nearest limb, forcing her to recoil, freeing Sarya to dart behind the monstrous thorax. She begins severing another thick cable. Each cut unleashes a shower of sparks and a sizzling hiss that makes Elias's nerves jangle. The Queen's thrashing grows more violent. Pieces of the cavern ceiling crumble under the force of her enraged movements. Elias's mission is simple now. Keep her focused on him. He shouts, firing bullet after bullet into the thick exoskeleton, hoping to do enough damage that she can't entirely ignore him. A shriek reverberates through the cavern as Sarya slices through the final cable. The energy core, partially embedded in the dais, flickers. The Queen reels, losing balance. Her gargantuan form crashes onto the dais with a thunderous impact, sending cracks spiderwebbing across the stone floor. For an instant, the entire cavern falls silent, except for her ragged, chittering exhalations. Elias moves in, spotting the portion of metal that glows with a subdued power, clearly the heart of the technology they need. He tries to pry it loose, but the Queen, still alive, hurls her massive body in a last-ditch attempt to crush him. He flings himself to the side. The rocky dais explodes in a burst of debris. The Queen's mandibles snap closed inches from Elias's leg, the acid sizzling on the stone, close enough that the noxious fumes burn his nostrils. Sarya leaps onto the Queen's back with a low battle cry. She stabs her blade directly between the segmented plates along the creature's spine. A violent spasm racks the queen. Her shriek echoes, mixing agony with a final defiance. Sarya twists the blade, and with a sickening crunch the queen collapses fully, her many legs falling limp. The presence of the monstrous tyrant goes still, leaving only the rasp of Sarya's labored breathing. Elias scrambles to the flickering metallic apparatus. Half buried, it pulses with feeble light. He braces his feet, uses his gloved hands to grip the device and yanks. At first, it doesn't budge. He adjusts his hold and pulls harder, ignoring the pain in his battered side. A sudden give, and the core dislodges from the dais in a crackle of cables. He tumbles backward, the device in his arms. It's surprisingly heavy, a swirling mass of alien circuitry that hums with an erratic pulse. From his vantage point, he spots Nyra across the chamber, still fending off straggling drones. Their numbers have thinned significantly, likely due to the Queen's defeat. But a handful remain, scuttling and hissing. He calls out to her. She pivots, her chest heaving, eyes blazing with that fierce violet starlight pattern. In a fluid motion, she dispatches the last 2 drones with well-placed shots. The cavern's silence after the final drone collapses is staggering. Elias stands, panting, clutching the core. Sarya slides off the queen's corpse, dropping to her knees momentarily. Nyra stumbles toward them, her breathing labored. They converge, battered and bruised. Each carries fresh scrapes, acid burns or gashes, yet relief tangles with triumph in the cool subterranean air. Nyra, her voice trembling slightly, says, "We have it. We can power the Allora's heart now." She glances at her sister, who's pressing a hand to her bleeding shoulder. "Let me see that," she adds, concern momentarily overshadowing their rivalry. She kneels next to Sarya, checking the wound. Elias sets the core aside carefully. His chest constricts at the sight of blood seeping through Sarya's armor. He's reminded again of how precarious life is, how close they came to losing everything. The tightness in his throat intensifies when Sarya meets his gaze. There's gratitude in her eyes, but also something that flickers with deeper emotion. Without thinking, he reaches out and gently places a hand over hers, the one pressed to the wound. She exhales softly, her braids sliding over her shoulder as she leans into him. He feels the tension in her posture, the rush of adrenaline still coursing through them both. For a moment, the cavern's glowing veins, the echoes of the battle, everything recedes into the background, and they share a quiet, intimate closeness. He can almost forget about the weight of guilt that so often crushes him. Nyra looks up from her inspection of the wound. Her eyes flick from Sarya's face to Elias's. A flicker of jealousy wars with empathy, and she turns away. The tremor of her humming breath rises in her throat, then fades. She stands, crossing her arms. "We need to get out of here before more show up," she says, her voice edged with tension. She's right, of course. They can't linger in this place. But before they can move, a violent tremor shakes the cavern. Chunks of rock fall from overhead. The dais cracks further, and massive fissures race across the floor. It seems as if Kethralis itself is responding to the Queen's death, or perhaps the severance of the energy lines. The entire subterranean domain might be on the verge of collapse. Elias scoops up the core, and Nyra helps Sarya to her feet. Together, they scramble away from the dais, weaving through the collapsing pillars. Dust fills the air, making every breath feel like swallowing grit. A labyrinth of shifting stone blocks their original path. They have to find another route, a dangerous scramble along the edges of the cavern. The ground quakes beneath their boots, threatening to throw them off balance. In a dark corridor that they hope leads to the surface, another partial collapse forces them to crawl through a narrow gap. The flickers of swirling lights within the rock vanish. They're left with the illumination of their own gear and the faint, distant glow of the sky through cracks above. It's a desperate flight upward, fueled by the knowledge that the place could cave in at any second. When they finally emerge onto the surface, gasping for the stale, dust-ridden air of Kethralis's exterior, they collapse onto the rocky ground. Above them stretches the alien sky, those swirling dust clouds tinted by the planet's faint suns. But in that moment, it feels almost like an open heaven. They trudge back to the outpost station in a combination of exhausted silence and subdued relief, the battered energy core held tight in Elias's arms. Sarya endures the pain of her shoulder wound, leaning on Nyra when it grows too much. Nyra doesn't protest. She's quiet, her expression distant, lost in a swirl of competing emotions. Elias remains vigilant, despite his exhaustion, scanning their surroundings for any sign of further threats. At last, they reach the station's main airlock. It's battered by a passing dust storm, but they force it open and stumble inside. The pressurized doors close behind them with a heavy clang, sealing out the howling wind. Inside, it's eerily quiet compared to the subterranean chaos they just escaped. Elias sets the core gently on a workbench, allowing a wave of weariness to surge through him. He takes a moment to peel off his damaged armor plating, wincing at the new bruises and burns. Sarya, her face pallid from blood loss, slumps against the wall. Nyra darts to retrieve medical supplies. No words are needed as she tends to her sister's wound. Elias stands close by, unsure if he should offer help or space. He feels a strange tenderness for both of them, each manifesting in different ways. With Sarya, he senses a kindred warrior spirit that calls to his protective instincts. With Nyra, he feels an earnest, searching loneliness that resonates with the emptiness he carries inside. That duality keeps him on edge, uncertain of his own feelings, let alone theirs. Once Sarya's shoulder is bandaged and the immediate danger has passed, Elias helps her to the station's small makeshift infirmary where she can lie down. Nyra, after ensuring her sister is stable, steps out into the corridor, her shoulders tense. Elias hesitates before following her. He finds her leaning against the wall, eyes closed, her breath humming softly. She opens her eyes when she hears him approach. Their gazes lock. He sees conflict in her, relief that they survived, jealousy for the closeness between him and Sarya, desire that flickers like a living spark. Before he can speak, she pushes away from the wall and closes the distance between them. Her voice trembles when she says, "You risked your life for both of us," again and again. Her breathing quickens, that faint hum deep in her chest. I don't know how to process this. I feel like I'm losing parts of myself, but I want—" He swallows thickly, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. "You're not losing anything," he manages. "We're all battered. We're all changed by this." He hesitates, torn between wanting to comfort her and the awareness of Sarya resting just a door away. Yet the draw to Nyra is impossible to deny. Something raw pulses between them, born of shared danger and the brush with mortality. She steps closer, and her pointed ears quiver. He can see the faint trace of her lavender skin carrying a subtle flush. The shape of her mouth, parted slightly, tempts him in a way that gnaws at his restraint. He aches with the memory of how she almost fell into that chasm, how he held her wrist, how her eyes widened. "You saved me," she whispers. "No one has ever done that for me without expecting something in return. Sometimes not even my own sister." He shakes his head, a mixture of sadness and longing swirling in him. "Nyra, you're worth saving." She lets out a shaky exhale, and in a swift, tentative motion, she closes the gap, pressing her lips to his. It's a hesitant kiss, filled with the uncertain push of fear that he might pull away, or that she might be overstepping her bounds. But Elias doesn't pull away. He returns the kiss softly, a wave of conflicting emotions hitting him, relief, guilt, desire, hope. The taste of her is unlike anything he's known. Her mouth is warm, her breath resonant with that faint hum, vibrating through him like a quiet thunder. He cups her face gently, deepening the kiss for just a moment, letting himself feel what it's like to be close to someone again. The memory of his lost squad feels distant in this fleeting moment. His heart clenches. He knows this is not a simple fling. The ties that bind them are complicated, loaded with cultural expectations and sibling bonds. When they finally break apart, Nyra'vel's eyes shine with tears unshed. She steps back, hugging her arms around herself. "I'm sorry," she whispers. "I shouldn't have—" "Sarya!" Elias presses a finger lightly to her lips. "It's okay," he says in a hushed tone. "We'll figure it out. But we need to talk about this, all three of us." She lowers her gaze. "Yes, but not now. Not while she's hurt, and I can't bear the look she'll give me." Elias nods. "Go rest. I'll check on her. We'll talk when everyone's stable, and maybe we can find some clarity." He says the words, but inside, he's just as unsure. The station corridor feels like a pressure chamber, his mind swirling with the sense that a dam is about to break. Nyra'vel gives a single nod, then turns away, retreating to her quarters. Elias stands there, hand pressed to his own chest. The armor is gone, but beneath the thick fabric of his undersuit, he feels his heart pounding. The taste of her lingers on his lips, interwoven with the dusty dryness of the Kethralis air. He closes his eyes for a moment, inhaling and exhaling slowly. Then he makes his way to the infirmary. Inside, Sarya rests on a small cot, eyes half-lidded. A soft overhead lamp casts gentle shadows on her face, accentuating the determined set of her jaw. Despite the bandages, she tries to sit up when he enters. He crosses the room quickly, placing a hand on her uninjured shoulder, guiding her to remain still. "You need to rest," he says. "That was a nasty wound. I want to make sure it doesn't get infected." She searches his face, her expression subdued yet intense. "Where's Nyra'vel?" She's resting too, tending her own wounds." He pauses, not sure how much to reveal of their moment in the hallway. He decides to remain silent about it. The tension in him grows. Sarya's eyes narrow slightly, as though she suspects something, but she doesn't press him. "Let me see your burns," she says, her voice firm. He hesitates, but then allows her to check the scorched area near his hip, where the acid spattered. She winces at the sight, shaking her head. "You're as stubborn as I am." He lets out a weary chuckle. "Comes with the job. You're lucky you only got scratched. That queen was bigger than anything I've fought before." The memory stirs a quiver of fear, overshadowed by relief that they survived. Sarya leans back, exhaling shakily. She glances at the infirmary door, then back at him. Her braids shift across her shoulder, and he notices the subtle lines of tension in her neck. Her voice drops to a near whisper. "I saw you and Nyra'vel on the dais, or maybe after. I'm not even sure anymore. It's all a blur, but I—" He softens his gaze, taking her hand carefully. "Sarya, She shakes her head, averting her eyes. "I'm not condemning you. I just don't know how to handle it. She and I—" Her voice falters and she exhales. "We have always shared. It's part of our tradition. But this time I feel something I haven't felt before, like I'm not sure I can share. But also I know I must, because she is my sister and we both—" She stops, swallowing hard. "I'm sorry. My thoughts are tangled." Elias's heart twists. The guilt he feels about feeling drawn to both of them flares hot. He's not the type of man who likes to sow discord, especially not between siblings. Yet in the heart of these repeated battles, forged by fear and survival, he's connected with them both in different but equally potent ways. He laces his fingers through hers and presses them gently. "We'll figure it out together, whatever that looks like. I don't want to come between you and your sister, but I also—" He falters, searching for the right words. "I can't deny how I feel." She looks at him with an aching vulnerability in her eyes, one he's only glimpsed a few times. "I just need to know that you won't abandon us, that you won't choose her over me, or me over her, or run away altogether." He inhales a shaky breath. "I lost my entire team once, friends, people I considered family. I never want to let that happen again. If you're asking for reassurance that I won't vanish the moment things get difficult, you have it. I'm here." Sarya nods, tears shining at the corner of her eyes. She lifts a hand to cup his cheek. The warmth of her palm, her bronzed skin against his, nearly undoes him. He leans into her touch, letting it ground him. The closeness in that moment is almost painful in its sweetness, especially knowing Nyra's presence lingers beyond the walls, also with her own bruised heart. Sarya's thumb strokes the scar on his cheek. He senses the flickering desire in her, exhaustion battling with yearning. Then the lights in the station flicker, and a slight shudder runs through the floor. Something about the battered power systems is reacting to the new strain. Elias snaps out of the intimate haze, pulling away reluctantly. We should get the core installed in the Allora's heart. We might not have much time before this station fails completely. She sighs, letting her hand fall from his face. The warmth of her touch lingers. Yes, you're right. Go. I'll be there in a moment. Elias stands, looking down at her. His heart clenches again at the sight of her looking vulnerable and wounded, yet so fiercely determined. He leaves the infirmary, stepping into the corridor, where he half expects to see Nyra, but she's not there. In the quiet hush of the station, he feels the weight of decisions waiting to be made. A swirl of emotions churns in his gut. Love, guilt, responsibility, fear. He wonders if, by the end of this ordeal, they'll find a resolution that doesn't leave someone in tears. He gathers the energy core from the workbench and makes his way to the docking bay, where the Allora's heart rests. It's a sleek ship in design, but battered from too many close calls, its hull scorched in places, internal systems on the brink of collapse. He sets the core on a transport sled and maneuvers it toward the engineering hatch. Sparks fly from exposed wires, the overhead lights flickering like a failing heartbeat. Grunting, he heaves the core into position near the old, damaged one. The technology doesn't quite match, but there's a chance the universal couplings can be rigged. As he begins removing the old unit, Sarya appears at the hatch, leaning heavily against the frame. Despite her injury, she insisted on helping. Her face is pale, but her eyes shimmer with that determined light. Nyra arrives shortly after, silent and guarded, but also ready to offer assistance. The three of them work in cramped quarters, carefully aligning the new core's ports with the ship's battered infrastructure. Each step requires a delicate balance of technical knowledge, raw strength and guesswork, because the Allora's heart was never meant to host such a component. Sparks rain down as they weld coupling points in place. The station's power fluctuates dangerously, and at one point, the entire bay goes dark. In the flickering emergency lights, they see each other only as silhouettes. Elias's heart thrums in that shadowed moment, feeling Nyra's presence behind him, Sarya's wounded but resolute presence beside him. They are an unlikely triad, held together by dire necessity and a blossoming bond that none of them fully anticipated. After hours of grueling effort, the final connection is made. The new core hums to life, a subdued but steady pulse. Indicators on the ship's console spring into motion. They brace themselves for any sign of overload, but the readings stabilize. A spark of hope flares in Elias's chest. The Allora's heart might just be flight-worthy again. They sit back in the cramped engineering bay, sweat-soaked and exhausted. The sisters exchange a look that speaks volumes. Nyra's humming breath is calmer, while Sarya's posture suggests relief. Elias slumps against a bulkhead, letting out a strained laugh. We might actually get off this cursed moon. Sarya offers a tired smile. We will. And then we decide what comes next. Nyra nods, though she avoids meeting her sister's eyes directly. Yes. What comes next? The hum of the repaired core vibrates through the ship's hull. It's a reassuring sound, a promise of a second chance. They decide to test the engines, but not before they tend to themselves. In the modest living quarters, they take turns using the small washroom. Elias focuses on cleaning his burns. When he emerges, he finds the sisters waiting in an adjoining room. He can sense the charged air immediately. Sarya's shoulder is bandaged. Nyra's bruise on her leg is healing. Both appear restless. The constraints of the mission are lifted, at least for now, which leaves them with the question of how to move forward. Sarya breaks the silence first. "I have walked the edge of death too many times," she says quietly. "I won't pretend that nothing has changed. I look at you," she glances from Elias to Nyra, "and I see two people I care for deeply, but I also fear losing you or being lost among the confusion of my own feelings." Nyra crosses her arms, her gaze downcast. "It's always been Sarya and I, bound by blood and duty. We promised never to let anything tear us apart. Then you came along, Elias, and at first I thought you were just some human soldier, but you proved yourself, and something changed in me, something that still frightens me because I don't understand it. I see how Sarya looks at you, and I see how you look at her, and—" Her voice catches. Elias steps closer, wanting to bridge that gap. He speaks slowly, carefully. "I never intended to break the bond between you two. His chest feels tight. "I didn't ask for this. But in these close quarters, fighting for our lives, something happened. I can't pretend I don't feel it." Sarya studies her sister. Traditionally, if one sister chooses a mate from another species, the other may share or relinquish any claim. But tradition is complicated, and I don't know if I want to share or relinquish. I just know I can't stand to lose either of you. Nyra's eyes lift, shimmering with unshed tears. "Sister, you promised to share him. But now you want the human all for yourself. You speak of tradition, but your heart is torn." The words are raw, echoing with both accusation and sadness. Sarya's jaw sets, tears glimmering in her own eyes. "I never wanted to choose. She glances at Elias, her expression pleading. "Is it possible that we don't have to choose? That somehow we can work this out?" Elias's breath catches. He realizes in that moment how far beyond the scope of anything he's ever known this situation lies. Monogamous norms from his own culture clash with the sisters' ancient traditions, and yet he can't deny the powerful draw he feels toward each of them. Perhaps the horrors of Kethralis, the near-death battles, have shaped them all into a unit that doesn't fit conventional definitions. He considers the possibility that maybe, just maybe, they can find a way to stand together, though he has no script for how it might work. He steps closer, gently taking Sarya's hand in one of his own and Nyra's hand in the other. "I don't have easy answers," he confesses, "but I know I care for both of you, and I know we've been through hell together. Maybe that means we've earned the right to define this bond on our own terms. If we can learn to trust each other, maybe we can figure out something that honors you both." Nyra glances at Sarya. Her eyes brim with tears, but she doesn't pull away. "I just don't want to be cast aside." Her voice trembles. "I don't want to lose my sister or you." Sarya presses her free hand over her heart, wincing slightly at the pain in her shoulder. "You won't lose me," she murmurs. "Sister, I love you. I always have. And Elias, you remind me that life can be more than tradition. You bring me hope in the midst of battle." They stand in hushed unity for a moment. The throbbing hum of the newly installed core resonates through the bulkheads, a reminder that they're in the battered shell of a ship that might soon carry them away from this wretched moon. But in this small living quarter, they share a fragile, electric closeness. Slowly, carefully, they draw one another into a tentative embrace. The shape of it is awkward at first. Elias, broad-shouldered and uncertain, Sarya, tall and lithe, Nyra, slighter but no less potent in presence. Their arms find places around one another's backs, heads, shoulders. A hush descends, broken only by the sound of overlapping breaths. When Sarya's bandaged shoulder twinges, Elias instinctively supports her, and Nyra adjusts to hold her from the other side. It becomes a moment of synergy, where the three of them exhale as if they've been holding their breath the entire time. Time drifts, measured by heartbeats and the subtle expansions of lungs. Eventually, Sarya lifts her gaze to Elias, the closeness bringing her face only a breath away. That swirl of desire, tinged with relief and longing, crosses her features. He leans in, and they kiss softly, a brush of lips that communicates acceptance and gratitude. An instant later, he feels Nyra'vel's breath at the side of his neck, and the hum stirs again in her throat, a gentle note that resonates through his chest. He turns to meet her kiss as well, mindful of her tears. The moment stretches, pulses, a shared vulnerability that transcends simple words. Their touches become more searching, more charged with the need to confirm they're all still here, alive and real. Sarya's hands tangle in Elias's cropped hair, drawing him closer, while Nyra'vel's breath trembles against his neck, her lips traveling along his jawline. He can feel the different qualities of their skin, Sarya's with its bronzed warmth, Nyra'vel's carrying that cooler lavender undertone. He can smell the faint metallic tinge of Kethralis dust that still clings to them, interwoven with each individual's natural scent. They guide each other to the small berth at the corner of the room, stumbling slightly as they navigate the limited space. The tension that has simmered for days finds an outlet in soft gasps, trembling sighs, and half-whispered reassurances. An unspoken agreement passes between them. They've risked their lives together, so stepping into this shared intimacy feels like a logical extension of that trust. Yet it's also a leap into unknown territory. Clothes are gradually shed, armor unlatched with careful hands to avoid further injury. Bandages remain where they must. Each new inch of exposed flesh is met with gentle touches, exploring the ridges of scars, the lines of muscle, the bruises left by harsh battles. The closeness hums with life, a defiant statement in the face of the death they nearly met underground. Their shared encounter becomes a tapestry of soft moans and guiding hands. Nyra'vel's hum resonates with heightened sensitivity, her skin seeming to carry the swirl of opalescent veins with renewed light. Sarya's braids slip over her shoulders, tickling Elias's chest as she shifts to kiss him, then nearer, an unspoken vow that they're in this together. Elias feels his heart pounding, partly from the primal rush of desire, partly from the emotional weight of the moment. He tries to be gentle, conscious that they're all marked by wounds, physical and otherwise. When the intensity builds toward a deeper level of joining, they slow, exchanging questioning looks. Consent passes unspoken but clear, an affirmation that they choose to share themselves without fear. Their bodies tangle, the cabin's dim light painting arcs of shadow across limbs. They surrender to the sensation, letting it wash away the dread that's clung to them for so long. As passion crests, they collectively sink into a hush of unity. The air is filled with quiet murmurs, trembling exhales, the press of warm skin, and the cascade of braided hair. Time blurs into a series of impressions, the taste of salt on lips, the sigh of relief that they're safe here, the sense of letting go of old burdens at least for a fleeting interval. A wave of heat and closeness builds until it breaks over them, leaving them spent, trembling and more tightly bound than before. They drift in a languid afterglow, bodies still entwined, faces damp with sweat and tears. Sarya rests her cheek against Elias's chest, and Nyra'vel's fingers lace through his, the other hand settled protectively on Sarya's thigh. No words seem sufficient, so they lie there, hearts pounding in near unison. Eventually, a soft fade to black embraces their moment, granting them needed rest and a sense of belonging in each other's arms. When the hush recedes, they awaken to the station's alarms chiming faintly. Reality reasserts itself, and the gravity of their mission returns. The station's power reserves are nearly depleted, and if they don't leave soon, they'll be stranded as Kethralis' storms tear the place apart. Wearily they dress, share lingering kisses, and silently vow not to let fear overshadow what they've shared. Sarya's wound still needs medical attention, but she insists she can fight if necessary. Elias and Nyra'vel help her with a fresh bandage, tension replaced by a tender cooperation. With the new energy core installed, the Allora's heart should be able to launch. They secure the cargo, strap themselves into the cockpit, and prepare to leave Kethralis behind. At the helm, Elias powers up the engines, listening for any irregularities in the thrumming. The readouts are stable. Sarya'lyn sits at the co-pilot station, wincing slightly at the ache in her shoulder, but managing the controls. Nyra'vel occupies the weapons console, scanning the area for any sign of airborne Drevak or other threats. Outside, swirling dust battered by intense winds scours the hull, but the engine's hum remains steady. With a forceful ignition, the ship lifts off the plateau. Turbulence buffets them, rocking the craft precariously. Nyra'vel grits her teeth, reading a spike in atmospheric interference, but the newly integrated core pumps a steady stream of power through the thrusters, allowing Elias to stabilize the ascent. They climb higher, pushing through the haze until they burst above the swirling clouds. The station grows small behind them, battered by the dust storms. Soon it's lost in the chaotic swirl of Kethralis' surface. A deep breath of relief passes between them as the Allora's heart breaks free into the vacuum of space. The darkness dotted with stars greets them, a serene contrast to the turmoil below. Elias gently guides the ship onto a stable flight path. The mood in the cockpit feels almost sacred, a unity forged by the fires of that savage moon. But their journey isn't over. As they set coordinates for a safe harbor, somewhere to refuel, rest and recover, they realize the Drevak threat may not be entirely behind them. Long-range sensors pick up faint signatures that might be pockets of these creatures that have adapted to space, or possibly some other hazard. They can't be sure. Regardless, they remain vigilant. Yet for the moment, the biggest battle they need to win is internal, the question of how to define their triad. Sarya'lyn, her voice hushed, says, "We're free of Kethralis, but are we free of what we carry?" Elias glances at her, then Nyra'vel. "Sometimes you have to choose to let go of old burdens, let them stay behind in the dust, like the shell of that station." Nyra'vel's gaze drifts to the star-speckled view screen. "And what about us?" He reaches over, pressing a few commands on autopilot, then gently turns her chair so she faces him. Sarya'lyn also shifts, mindful of her injured shoulder, but she wants to see him head-on. Elias tries to steady his voice, though it's thick with emotion. "I don't want to leave either of you, and I don't think you want to leave each other. Kethralis tested us, threatened to break us, but we survived together. Maybe that's enough of a sign that we can figure this out." The sisters exchange a look. Sarya'lyn's eyes, swirling with blues, reflect hope laced with uncertainty. Nyra'vel's flicker with violet silver. She breathes out a soft hum. "We can try, but we have to promise honesty. No more hiding." Sarya'lyn nods, summoning what remains of her strength. "We share, or we don't survive. That has always been our family's creed." Elias rests a hand lightly on each of their arms. "Then we share. Everything. The joys, the pain, the vulnerabilities. We trust that what we have is strong enough to handle it." A fragile but genuine smile curves Sarya'lyn's lips. Nyra'vel closes her eyes, and when she opens them, she looks more at peace than he's ever seen her. They stay like that for a moment, affirming the unspoken bond that unites them. As the ship charts its course away from Kethralis, they begin the process of healing. In the days that follow, Sarya'lyn's wound requires regular care. Nyra'vel uses her skill with energy manipulation to help regulate the core's output, ensuring it meshes properly with the ship's systems. Elias navigates them through uncertain sectors of space, using his keen sense of tactics to avoid hostile encounters. At night, they find solace in each other's company, sometimes in the form of quiet embraces, sometimes in deeper explorations of their newfound triad connection. Each shared moment chips away at the scars of the past, forging an intimacy that transcends boundaries. During one such evening, they gather in the small mess hall, the hum of the core a steady backdrop. They've set the autopilot while drifting near a cluster of star debris, safely out of any known shipping lanes. The overhead lighting is dimmed to a soft radiance, giving the room a comforting glow. They're reminiscing about the battles on Kethralis, how close they came to death, how improbable it is that they're here together. Nyra, prodding at her plate of rehydrated rations, says, "I used to think that I'd prove my worth by surpassing Sarya in every skill, that if I was good enough, I wouldn't feel like her shadow anymore." She glances at her sister with apologetic eyes. "But on Kethralis, I realized that I never wanted to surpass you, sister. I just wanted to stand by your side." Sarya bows her head. "I should have seen your struggle. I was so focused on maintaining the warrior legacy that I forgot we were supposed to be a team, and I almost lost you." Elias reaches across the table, placing a hand over both of theirs. "You won't lose each other," he says firmly, "not if we keep choosing to hold on." They fall into a comfortable silence, one that allows the weight of those words to settle. Finally, Sarya lifts her gaze to Elias. "What about you? Will your nightmares of your past squad ever let you believe in a future with us?" He exhales, remembering those lost faces, hearing echoes of their final cries. But something in him feels lighter now. "I won't lie. Those memories will stay with me. But I'm not going to let them dictate my future. I think I can finally let go, or at least carry them, without letting them crush me." A gentle warmth suffuses Sarya's expression. Nira's hum resonates in a small, content way. For once, the quiet presence in her chest seems to signal comfort rather than tension. Weeks pass, marked by routine maintenance and slow but steady traveling towards safer space. Their relationship solidifies in unspoken increments, a shared laugh over a broken valve in the engine room, a comforting touch on a rough day, an evening's gentle exploration that reaffirms the closeness they discovered on Kethralis. There are moments of jealousy or uncertainty that flare up, but they address them openly, determined not to let secrets erode what they've built. Eventually, they arrive at a neutral trade station orbiting a gas giant, a place known for discreet repairs and minimal questions asked. Sarya and Nyra accompany Elias to negotiate for supplies. The station's corridors are crowded with various species, a cacophony of voices and languages. Once again, Elias is reminded of how distinctive the sisters are. Sarya's tall form and braided cerulean hair, Nyra's raven tresses with that subtle crimson sheen, both turning heads wherever they pass. But the stairs no longer make them uncomfortable. The sisters walk with confidence, and Elias remains by their side. They secure everything the Allora's heart needs to finalize repairs. A bored clerk handles the transaction with disinterest, passing them the data chip for the docking fees. Sarya and Nyra glance at each other, a small, private smile passing between them. Elias stands at the clerk's booth, signing off on the required forms. When they return to their ship, the repairs go swiftly. By the end of the day, the vessel is in better shape than it's been in a long time. With the supplies loaded, they gather in the cockpit to decide their next destination. The galaxy spreads out before them, brimming with potential hazards and wonders. Nyra, sitting at the navigation console, swivels her seat to face Elias and Sarya. "So, we can go anywhere. Where do we want to go?" Elias thinks of all the places he's never seen, all the star systems he once imagined visiting. He looks at Sarya, at Nyra, and feels a quiet excitement. "Somewhere new, a place we can call our own." Sarya nods, her eyes reflecting the swirl of possibility. "Agreed. No more running from nightmares. Let's build something worth fighting for." Nyra's lips curl into a slow smile. "Let it be somewhere bright, with warmth, far from the memory of Kethralis." They share a moment of unspoken unity, and Elias places his hand on the thruster controls. The console lights come to life, flooding the cockpit with faint luminescence. The sisters lean in, each placing a hand next to his. In that simple gesture, they confirm their resolve to face whatever the universe throws at them, together. The Allora's heart glides away from the trade station, merging into the star-dappled void. The adrenaline and terror of Kethralis are behind them, replaced by the comforting hum of a healthy engine core. They haven't just repaired a ship. They've built a bond strong enough to endure cosmic storms. In the corridor near the cockpit, Saria catches Nyra'vel's hand. The two sisters look into each other's eyes. A small moment of vulnerability washes over them. "We did almost lose each other," Nyra murmurs, "but not anymore." Saria's features soften into a gentle smile. "We have each other and Elias. We can make this work." And they share a tender embrace, the memory of hostility and fear overshadowed by renewed love. Elias steps out from the cockpit, observing the quiet scene. He approaches slowly, laying a comforting hand on both their shoulders. They turn toward him, each greeting him with a soft gaze. He pulls them into an embrace, feeling their warmth, their breath mingling, the resonance of Nyra'vel's faint hum, and the proud steadiness in Saria's posture. It is, he realizes, everything he'd been missing. Time passes, and in that intimate corridor they linger, losing themselves in kisses and caresses that carry the flavor of promise. When they finally part, each of them breathless, they don't speak of impossible futures or fleeting romances. Instead, they speak of forging a path that merges their hearts, their skills, their yearnings. No more guilt for Elias, no more envy for Nyra, no more stifling duty for Saria. They will shape their destiny beyond the traditions that confine them and the tragedies that haunt them. They return to the cockpit, each taking a station. Elias mans the pilot seat, Nyra takes navigation, and Saria oversees the tactical readouts. They exchange small smiles as they collaborate, the synergy evident. Stars stretch ahead, beckoning them with mysteries untold. The tension they once felt is replaced by anticipation of the next adventure, one they will face as a united front. As they engage the ship's faster-than-light drive, the starfield outside blurs into radiant streaks. In that luminous swirl, they see reflection of themselves. Three souls woven together by battles, shared desire, and a willingness to stand side by side. The swirl of cosmic light seems to echo their own transformations, brightening the path ahead. They settle into the comfortable hum of the ship. Saria's shoulder will heal in time, and Elias's burns have already begun to fade, thanks to Nyra'vel's attentive care. The tension in their hearts, too, has found a way to ease, replaced by a newfound acceptance. The three of them discuss possible planets to explore, scanning for ones rumored to have warm beaches or lush forests, a far cry from the desolate expanses of Kethralis. During one quiet watch rotation, Saria relieves Elias at the helm. Nyra is asleep in a bunk, snoring softly with her hum diminished to a faint purr. Elias remains in the cockpit, shoulders brushing Saria's as she takes the pilot's seat. They speak in low voices about the future, sharing small jokes about culture shock once they land somewhere populated. Saria teases that humans might never see him the same way once they learn he's in a relationship with not just one, but two fierce alien sisters. He laughs softly, the darkness of old traumas eased by the comfort of her presence. The next day, Nyra steers them to a vantage point by a cosmic phenomenon, a drifting nebular bloom, shimmering with multicolored waves. They park the ship in orbit, gazing at the vibrant spectacle from the observation deck. Nyra stands between them, pointing out patterns in the swirling gases. For a moment, they are simply travelers, enamored by the universe's beauty, free from the haunting grip of Kethralis. Elias slips an arm around each sister, pulling them close, and they watch the shifting lights in peaceful togetherness. Their bond, though unconventional, feels right. Eventually, they make the jump to a remote star system rumored to be welcoming of travelers. A small frontier planet named Halamar beckons, known for its turquoise seas and drifting archipelagos. They land on a modest docking platform on the planet's surface. Warm breezes greet them, carrying the scent of ocean salt. After the dryness of Kethralis, the humidity and gentle sunlight feel almost surreal. They disembark, strolling through a simple settlement lined with domed structures built from local coral-like stone. The people here, human, alien and hybrid, pay them little mind. In a waterfront district, they secure temporary lodging, eager for a respite from the constant threat of death that defined their time on the moon. The sisters marvel at the concept of open water, so different from their homeworld. Elias breathes in the sea air, letting it wash away lingering nightmares. One evening on Halamar, they walk along a beach of turquoise sand. The ocean glitters under the setting sun, shifting into pastel shades as dusk descends. They find a secluded spot where the waves lap gently against smooth stones. There, they spread out a small blanket. The atmosphere is tranquil, but an undercurrent of importance ripples in the air. They've decided to speak openly about their future, to set any final uncertainties to rest. Sarya stands before them, letting the evening breeze catch her cerulean braids. Her expression is firm, but tender. Nyra, sister, I need to know if you truly feel ready for this. Sharing Elias, sharing me, I don't want you to do it out of obligation or fear of losing me. Nyra closes her eyes, taking a slow breath. She opens them again, meeting her sister's gaze. I want this. Not because I don't have fears, but because I choose it. You and Elias, you give me something I've never had. A sense of wholeness. I don't want to be the one left out in the cold. She looks to Elias, her eyes shining with vulnerability. Do you truly want me, Elias? I know you care for Sarya too. I can handle sharing, but only if you see me as more than her sister. Elias steps close, reaching to cup Nyra's cheek with gentle reverence. You're not just her sister. You're you, fierce, brilliant, protective, and yes, sometimes insecure, but that vulnerability makes you real. I want you as much as I want Sarya. Sarya's voice softens. We all have to be honest. If jealousy or doubt creeps in, we talk. If one of us feels left out, we find balance. This won't be easy, but I believe it's worth the effort. Nyra nods. Agreed. She takes her sister's hand, and they turn to Elias. He slides his arms around them both, his voice trembling with emotion. We do this together. They hold each other in that moment of promise, under the darkening sky. Waves lap at their feet, the ocean reflecting the first stars of night. The union they forge stands outside the norms of any single culture, shaped instead by their shared triumphs and tragedies. It's a new tradition, one that belongs to just the three of them. Later, in the soft glow of a beachside fire, they seal their commitment with tender intimacy. Kisses taste of salt and the sweet wine they shared earlier, while gentle fingers explore the lines of each body, reaffirming all the ways they fit together. The night air is warm, the crackle of the fire blending with the hush of waves. Laughter and whispers interweave, along with soft moans when desire flares. They drift into a fade of closeness, eventually nestling together beneath a makeshift canopy, content to let the ocean's lullaby guide them into sleep. Morning arrives with a bright saffron sunrise. The sisters wake entwined with Elias, the sea breeze toying with loose strands of their hair. They share lazy smiles as they rise to greet the day. In the months to come, they'll face new challenges, perhaps new threats. But for now, they savor each moment of peace. They remain on Halamar for a while, earning credits through odd jobs. Elias provides security services for local merchants. Sarya teaches a self-defense class to the settlement's youngsters, impressing them with her swift, fluid style. Nyra uses her knack for energy manipulation to repair damaged equipment, surprising the locals with her meticulous skill. They form friendships with some of the residents, share laughter around communal fires. They discover that forging a life together on new soil might be possible. One afternoon, they stand at the planet's vantage point overlooking an endless stretch of blue sea. Sarya's bandaged shoulder is finally healed, leaving only a faint scar. Nyra is in high spirits, humming contentedly, that hum no longer fueled by anger, but by calm affection. Elias stands between them, a sense of belonging settling in his chest. He casts aside the last vestiges of guilt for his lost squad, allowing their memory to rest peacefully. In a quiet voice, he says, "I think this is the happiest I've been in a long time." Nyra leans her head on his shoulder, while Sarya slips an arm around his waist. "We deserve this," Nyra murmurs. "All of us." As the sun sets on another day in this tranquil haven, they gather on the porch of their modest lodging. Over a simple meal, they talk about the future. Perhaps they'll stay on Halamar for a season. Perhaps they'll venture deeper into the galaxy, seeking new wonders. Whatever they decide, they'll face it together. There's no sense of leftover conflict, no open threads that threaten their peace. They've chosen love and unity, forging a bond that thrives on their differences. Night enfolds them again, but unlike on Kethralis, there is no looming dread. When they lie down to rest, they do so in a tangle of arms and legs, the gentle warmth of each other's bodies reminding them that they are safe. In that final hush of the day, Nyra's hum is soft, Sarya's breathing steady, and Elias's heart calm. The storms of the past have quieted, replaced by a serenity that resonates between them like the hush of distant waves. Kethralis is now just a memory of dust and darkness, caves and monstrous queens, overshadowed by the brilliance of a new dawn. The promise that each character made to themselves, to one another, finds fulfillment here in the glow of a world that welcomes them without judgment. And in their unified hearts, they carry the certainty that they have found something more precious than any ancient energy core. A complete, shared love that overcame all obstacles and now stands firm, final, and free.